Good day, and welcome to AI Podcast at digitVIEW. Whether you're a business leader, technologist, or simply curious about what's next, we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming the way we work, create, and make decisions.
All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling a massive paradox, one that defines our age. We're building these unbelievably powerful AI systems, but we're launching them into a society that feels like it's coming apart at the seams. So what happens when the very architecture of our future is built on a foundation that's already cracked? And that really gets to the core question here, doesn't it? We have all this amazing technology, tools that could literally solve some of humanity's biggest problems, and yet there's this crisis of faith in everything, in our institutions, in the news we read, and even in each other. How on earth did we get to this point? So this is the fundamental tension we're going to explore. On one side, you have the incredible, mind-boggling promise of AI. But on the flip side, you have the immense peril of letting it loose in a world that's already struggling with some deep, deep social and ethical wounds. It's a paradox that's shaping everything. And that contradiction really sets the stage for our whole conversation. Think about it. We're using AI to build the world of tomorrow, but the very ground beneath our feet feels totally unstable. The stakes? Well, they couldn't be any higher. This quote just nails it. Our future, the survival of democracy itself, it doesn't really depend on how smart the machine is. It depends on the moral clarity of us, the people steering it. This isn't just a story about code. It's about our choices, our values, and whether we're ready for that responsibility. Okay, so let's really get into it. To understand why we're so vulnerable to AI manipulation, we first have to understand the social decay that's making it possible. And we're looking at two big, tangled threads, something called moral poverty and the algorithmic lies that thrive because of it. First things first, what exactly is moral poverty? Now, this isn't about not having enough money. Not at all. It's about a lack of something else, a lack of civic responsibility, of empathy, especially among the most powerful and wealthy people who've become kind of disconnected from the very societies they have so much influence over. And check this out, because this table really breaks it down beautifully. Material poverty, we know that one. It hits the working class, leads to real physical suffering. But moral poverty, that's a condition of the elite. And its impact isn't hunger, it's corruption. It's the slow erosion of democracy itself. So how does this even happen? Well, when you have extreme wealth, you can essentially build these moats around your life. You get to bypass failing public schools. You don't have to deal with crumbling infrastructure or the daily struggles most people face. And that insulation just severs any sense of a shared destiny. It kills empathy. And if that moral poverty is like the dry rot eating away at the foundations of our society, then organized deception, well, that's the match that sets the whole thing on fire. When a society is morally weakened, lies and scapegoating become super effective tools for leaders who want to dodge any blame for real systemic issues. And the impact is it's staggering. With AI supercharging misinformation, a poll from 2025 found that only 8%, just 8% of people felt very confident they could tell what was real from what was fake online. This is what experts are calling epistemic collapse. It's the breakdown of our shared reality. And that is terrifying. So all this moral decay creates a direct conflict, a real human-level clash. On one side, you have the powerful, who too often just give in to protect their own status. And on the other side, you have ordinary people who somehow find the courage to stand up and resist. This leads to what the source calls the capitulation of the elite. When democratic norms start to get threatened, the number one priority for these insulated leaders often switches from, defending principles to just preserving their own wealth and power, or to put it more bluntly, figuring out how to get in on the grift. But then contrast that with this incredible, iconic image of a single shipyard worker in Nazi Germany refusing the salute while everyone around him conforms. It is the perfect example of extraordinary courage coming from an ordinary person. A silent but monumental act of defiance. These people are what researchers call upstanders. And what they find is that folks who do these courageous things, they're not really making a calculated pros and cons decision. For them, it doesn't even feel like a choice. It's an imperative. It's this deep gut feeling, a sense of shared humanity that says, you just have to stand up for what's right. And this chart does a brilliant job of laying out the three key roles in this whole conflict. You've got the elites, motivated by self-preservation, which leads to democracy eroding. You have the manipulators, who are just seeking power, which leads to all this polarization. And then you have ordinary citizens, motivated by empathy, who end up being the ones preserving our civil liberties.
Okay, so now let's zoom out from the individual level to the state level. Because this whole struggle is playing out on a massive scale, inside government agencies and across the global stage. These are the battlefields where the future of AI is actually being decided right now. And let's be clear, AI isn't some far-off future thing. It is already here. A 2026 assessment found that over half of all government employees use AI every single day, and that number jumps to 64% in federal agencies. It's already deeply woven into the machinery of the state. But there is a massive fight brewing over how to control it. At the federal level, there's a huge push to deregulate, with the argument being we have to do it to win the global AI race against countries like China. But at the same time, you have states pushing back hard, passing their own laws to regulate AI and protect their citizens from bias and discrimination. And the stakes are absolutely geopolitical. Just look at this chart. It reveals an incredible, almost unbelievable vulnerability. The entire global AI ecosystem, all of it, all that software and potential, depends on a physical supply chain where over 90% of the most advanced computer chips are made in one single place, Taiwan. And this kind of vulnerability is fueling a massive geopolitical shift. The old dream of a single, unified global internet, it's kind of fading. Instead, what we're seeing is the rise of sovereign AI, where countries are building their own, self-contained AI systems to protect their data and their national interests. The world is becoming a place of digital walled gardens. So, where does all this leave us? It feels like we're at a huge crossroads. We've diagnosed the problem pretty clearly. The real question is, how do we act? How do we take this technology and use it to actually repair our democracy, instead of letting it shatter it completely? Well, here's a fascinating kind of out there idea. What if AI could actually enhance democracy? This theoretical model imagines a system where you vote normally, but an AI analyzes your voting history over time. It would reward you for being persistent on issues and even for thoughtfully changing your mind. Basically, your sustained civic engagement would become mathematically more valuable. And that brings us to a possible path forward. This 5-point strategy really pulls together everything we've talked about. It's about redefining success in tech beyond just making a profit. It's about investing in everything from our power grids to our civic education. It's about protecting whistleblowers, actually using AI to improve democracy, and working with other countries to stop a new arms race. Because in the end, it all comes back to us. The AI we're building is going to be a mirror. It will learn from our behavior, from our values, and from all the lies we tell ourselves. So the ultimate question really isn't about the technology at all. It's about what kind of society and what kind of people we're going to choose to be.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we're examining the deeply fractured landscape of 2025 and 2026. This is a period where artificial intelligence has, it's completely transcended its initial categorization as just some technological novelty. It has become the foundational architecture of governance, economics, security, and, social cohesion. But this massive integration is occurring against a backdrop of severe societal decay, which our source material heavily characterizes as being driven by the moral poverty of the elite classes.
Exactly. And the central question we are exploring today is how we actually ensure the survival of the democratic project in this profoundly AI-mediated future. Do we rely on a top-down, structural, algorithmic reimagining of our civic institutions? Or is the only true defense the decentralized, grassroots courage of ordinary citizens actively resisting elite-controlled technology?
Right. And this discussion emerges directly from the fascinating analysis in Moral Poverty in the Age of Machines, Algorithmic Manipulation and Democracy. I will be arguing that artificial intelligence offers unprecedented mechanisms to structurally upgrade and repair our democratic processes.
And I will be arguing that because top-down AI deployment is fatally compromised by the profound moral poverty of the elite, our democratic survival relies exclusively on localized human courage.
To really understand why systemic, algorithmic solutions are necessary, we have to look at the immense friction currently paralyzing modern governance. We are on a trajectory toward total epistemic collapse, a complete breakdown in our shared reality where nobody can agree on basic facts. The transition to cloud computing over the last decade wasn't just an IT upgrade. It became the absolute bedrock for AI automation, and the public sector has finally recognized this out of sheer necessity.
Right, but recognizing a tool and using it responsibly are two very different things.
Look at the actual integration. By 2026, state, local, and federal agencies have shifted from treating AI as an experimental toy to an outcomes-driven necessity. The statistics are wild. 51% of government employees now utilize an AI application daily or at least several times a week. Federal agencies are leading that charge at 64%. They are using AI to assume the repetitive, rules-based work that grinds public services to a halt. We're talking about drastically reducing administrative errors and clearing massive case backlogs, like veterans waiting months for benefits or small businesses waiting on permits.
Yeah, I don't disagree that clearing a backlog is practically helpful, but you're talking about reimagining democracy, not just speeding up paperwork.
I am, because it goes beyond bureaucratic efficiency. We can't simply reject AI. We must use it to build a better system from scratch. Advanced models can act as a cognitive prosthetic. Think of it as an extension of our own brains that handles the heavy lifting of logic and data analysis. AI can monitor vast data sets in real time, accurately detecting emerging social challenges and bringing vital issues to policymakers before they become crisis. Now, yes, the human brain relies on friction and struggle to form neural pathways, and there's a real risk of our logic atrophying if knowledge acquisition gets too easy, but a properly harnessed AI can bridge the digital divide and fundamentally correct the architecture of our governance.
The core issue with your perspective is that it treats these systems as neutral, benevolent tools. It completely ignores the sociology of the people building and deploying them. Systemic algorithmic solutions are inherently flawed because they are managed by an elite class suffering from profound moral poverty.
How are we defining moral poverty here, though? Because it's clearly not a financial metric.
No, not at all, and let's be very precise about the text's definition. Moral poverty is not a lack of material resources. It is a severe deficit in civic responsibility, ethical grounding, and communal empathy among those who hold disproportionate power. Our traditional poverty indices fundamentally fail to capture the moral destitution of the affluent. We have corporate executives, tech elites, and government officials prioritizing personal gain over societal stability. They utilize their massive wealth to build literal and figurative moats to insulate themselves from the societal decay they often accelerate.
Moats like private security, offshore wealth, and gated digital communities.
Exactly. This extreme wealth creates a dangerous illusion of independence. It severs the foundational codependence required for a healthy civilization. When elites amass fortunes surpassing the GDP of entire nations, they simply bypass failing public education systems and deteriorating infrastructure. Because they don't experience the immediate friction of societal collapse, they lose the capacity for empathy. And this detachment breeds cowardice. They will inevitably capitulate to authoritarianism or systemic corruption if it preserves their wealth and status. Therefore, the only reliable bulwark against democratic erosion is what the analysis calls the courage of the commonplace. It's ordinary individuals who perceive a common humanity and step into the breach when the elites fail.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. We can actually structurally bypass that very apathy and elite manipulation you're talking about. The solution to a broken democratic system isn't just crossing our fingers and relying on spontaneous individual courage. It is the active, algorithmic reimagining of democracy itself to mathematically reward that exact civic virtue.
Mathematically rewarding virtue? That sounds incredibly dystopian. How does that even work in practice?
Well, consider the theoretical model proposed by science fiction author Eugene Fisher at that Yale University workshop on reimagining democracy. Fisher detailed an algorithmic voting system designed to cure voter apathy and the zero-sum scapegoating that infects modern politics. You know, the tactic of blaming vulnerable groups for complex systemic failures just to win cheap votes.
Conceptually, his model establishes mathematically verifiable loyalty points for democracy.
Okay, but voting is a fundamental right, not a loyalty program at a grocery store.
Hear me out. A citizen casts a simple ballot, secured through advanced cryptographic encryption, just as they do today. But the back-end infrastructure algorithmically weighs their vote based on historical consistency and thoughtfulness. The model relies on a baseline vote power equal for absolutely everyone, so it's fundamentally democratic. But it adds algorithmically determined scaling factors.
Scaling factors based on what exactly?
Based on persistent engagement. Imagine a voter who has consistently voted for environmental protections for a decade, even when their chosen candidates lose over and over. The algorithm uses a scaling factor to reward that persistence, demonstrating they genuinely have skin in the game regarding that issue. Conversely, there is a mechanism to measure the rate of reflection. If a citizen changes their mind based on new data or shifting societal realities, the system rewards that thoughtful adaptation. It shifts democracy from a crude popularity contest, which, as you noted, is easily manipulated by loud lies, into a highly nuanced aggregator of public intellect and enduring values. We can literally engineer the system to elevate the courage of the commonplace.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. The public cannot possibly trust an elite-managed algorithmic voting system when organized deception is already causing an epistemic collapse in our society. You speak of rewarding reflection, but democracies require a baseline of shared reality to function. Citizens cannot become the kinds of people self-governance requires if they are continuously lied to.
But isn't the algorithm designed to filter out the noise of those lies?
Who writes the filter? The elites, the political entrepreneurs, use AI to flood the zone with synthetic lies to paper over actual governance failures. The text highlights how vicious political entrepreneurs use zero-sum scapegoating to blame vulnerable minorities for complex failures in things like global supply chains or housing inflation. Now, collide that historic vulnerability with the unprecedented capabilities of AI to generate hyper-realistic deepfakes and micro-target vulnerable psychological profiles at scale.
The micro-targeting is definitely a concern. I'll concede that.
It's more than a concern. It is a structural weapon. Look at the polling from the summer of 2025. It is absolutely devastating. Only 8% of citizens felt very confident in their ability to distinguish between real and fake online content. Meanwhile, 57% were very concerned about the influence of deep fakes in elections. When the public can no longer agree on fundamental facts, debate and compromise break down entirely. That vacuum allows illiberal democracy to flourish. Illiberal democracies maintain the aesthetic rituals of the system, like the very elections you want to algorithmicize, but completely abandon civil liberties. Top-down civic AI is dangerous because the malicious actors deploying it will always degrade the cognitive defenses of the populace faster than any loyalty point algorithm can reward thoughtfulness.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. The proliferation of deepfakes and epistemic collapse you're describing is exactly why strong, centralized technological dominance is required. We are not just talking about local civic design here. We are talking about global geopolitical survival.
Geopolitics shouldn't be an excuse to override domestic civil liberties.
It's not an excuse, it's the physical reality of the board we are playing on. The development of artificial intelligence is fundamentally a geopolitical and physical infrastructure race. It has sparked an existential competition between superpowers like the United States and China. There is a massive physical infrastructure reality to AI that software evangelists often overlook. We need unprecedented human capital, scalable power generation, and secure global supply chains.
But how does that justify a top-down federal overhaul of our democratic values?
Because without it, the system collapses from the outside in. Currently, more than 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors are produced in Taiwan. That leaves the entire global democratic ecosystem profoundly vulnerable to economic coercion or political upheaval. Furthermore, the massive data centers required for these AI models have brutally exposed 3 decades of systemic underinvestment in America's transmission grids. Federal initiatives to win the global AI race,
including the integration of tech nationalism and domestic-first policies, are absolutely necessary to protect the democratic ecosystem from foreign adversaries.
So we abandon our values to save our hardware?
We secure our hardware so we have a space to practice our values. If we do not establish federal AI supremacy and onshore these critical supply chains, the debate over how to run our democracy will be entirely moot. The technological architecture dictating global security will be controlled by hostile states. We need a unified, aggressive, federal posture to ensure our data and strategic capabilities are not reliant on foreign corporate entities.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the profound constitutional friction and the complete abdication of ethics that this federal supremacy demands? By 2026, the federal government didn't just push for supply chain dominance, they actively revoked safety constraints to prioritize raw speed. They explicitly framed those constraints as adversarial attempts to paralyze the industry. They sought unrestricted corporate innovation just to win this global race you mentioned.
Speed is a critical factor in a geopolitical race. If you fall behind, you lose the ability to set global standards.
But at what cost domestically? In the absence of federal guardrails, 30 states had to step up and issue their own legislation. They heavily focused on algorithmic discrimination bans to protect vulnerable groups from these opaque top-down models. And how did the federal government react to states trying to protect their citizens? They viewed these state laws as an intolerable obstruction, an unmanageable patchwork getting in the way of progress.
To be fair, a 30-state patchwork of conflicting tech regulations makes building unified national systems nearly impossible for developers.
Perhaps, but it gets worse. Frighteningly, federal authorities even argued that state mandates requiring the removal of ideological bias force AI models to produce false results. This perfectly illustrates the elite moral poverty we discussed. The federal government prioritizes raw, unfiltered output over protecting marginalized communities from baked-in biases. But the ultimate proof of this rot is the 2026 Anthropic defense contract incident.
Ah, yes. I figured we would get to the Anthropic incident.
We have to, because it encapsulates the entire problem. Anthropic took a principled ethical stance. They explicitly refused to provide their technology to the Pentagon if it was to be used for mass surveillance or fully autonomous weapons. That is exactly the kind of ethical guardrail we desperately need. And what happened? Pentagon leadership derisively rejected those stipulations. The executive branch issued orders demanding federal agencies discontinue the use of Anthropic models entirely, and OpenAI immediately absorbed the vacated contracts.
The Pentagon has a mandate to maintain military superiority. They can't let a single vendor dictate rules of engagement.
But it proves that market forces and tech nationalism will always override ethical boundaries. The government demands unfettered technological dominance, ensuring that the future of global conflict will be heavily mediated by algorithms operating at speeds beyond human cognitive capacity. You cannot trust this federal machinery to protect domestic democratic safety when it explicitly sacrifices morality for speed on the world stage.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it assumes the technology is permanently locked into a destructive zero-sum paradigm. I acknowledge the Anthropic incident highlights a severe tension between corporate morality and national security imperatives. It wasn't a great look. However, artificial intelligence is not fundamentally destined to replicate elite moral poverty. AI can be fundamentally programmed with the values of the ordinary upstander, the exact empathy, courage, and recognition of a shared, codependent humanity you praise.
How do you program a machine to have the courage of an upstander? It doesn't have a conscience.
You program it by aligning its core objectives with human flourishing rather than extraction. We can leverage AI to bake a bigger economic pie rather than allowing elites to use it to hoard wealth behind their gold-bricked moats. Look at the profound potential for the biological and physical aspects of our survival. Generative AI is accelerating the discovery of novel medicines right now. It is mapping complex proteins and predicting viral mutations with unprecedented accuracy.
Medical advancements are wonderful, but they don't solve the collapse of civic empathy.
But they relieve massive societal friction. As humanity ages, AI-driven robotics and predictive health monitors can allow the elderly to maintain self-reliance and dignity far longer than historically possible. That reduces the strain on families and public health systems. Furthermore, in the realm of cognitive expansion, AI-mediated education can bridge the digital divide for under-resourced students. Instead of just outsourcing human thought to server farms, AI can be designed to facilitate the Socratic method.
You think an AI chatbot is going to be the next Socrates?
I think it can challenge human assumptions on a personalized level. It can be trained to identify logical fallacies in our reasoning and actively force us to confront the uncomfortable truths of our historical narratives. It can actually teach citizens to recognize when they are being manipulated by those very political entrepreneurs you're worried about. The technology can be the ultimate tool for human improvement, but only if we actively choose to shape it that way, structurally.
I come at it from a different way. You cannot program the essence of the ordinary upstander into a machine, because true courage is autonomic, and it requires something algorithms fundamentally lack: skin in the game.
Define what you mean by skin in the game in this context.
It means facing personal consequences. Algorithms optimize for attention, and in our current digital landscape, that means driving outrage, fear, and exhaustion. This digital fatigue threatens to overwhelm the fundamental human decency that forms the bedrock of a functioning society. Political scientists studying the psychology of altruism note that ordinary people who risk their safety to help others don't weigh the pros and cons in a calculated algorithmic manner. They don't run a statistical probability on whether they should help someone. It is a fundamental autonomic imperative driven by their worldview and their proximity to the ground.
But can't AI give them the tools to act on that worldview more effectively?
Not when the AI is controlled by a system designed to insulate people from risk. As Soren Kierkegaard posited, true realization involves mastering the moment through decisive action. It is the endurance and willingness to face a known danger for a higher good. Look at the historical and contemporary manifestations of this courage. It is the German shipyard worker in Hamburg in 1936, silently but monumentally refusing the Nazi salute, with his arms firmly folded across his chest among a sea of conforming peers. He had actual physical skin in the game.
That's a powerful historical image. But what does that look like in the heavily digitized landscape of 2026?
It looks like the everyday citizen looking at a hyper-realistic deepfake that confirms all their worst political fears and having the autonomic courage to pause, verify, and refuse to hit share. It manifests in the school coach who attends their first ever protest to protect young children from masked government agents, deciding fundamentally that this is not who we are. This localized grassroots destigmatization, this raw human decency cannot be outsourced to server farms. When elites fail, and they will fail, it falls entirely to the citizenry to confront lies, manage biases, and assume individual responsibility. The machine will merely learn the lies we tell ourselves if we do not maintain this fierce human resistance.
Look, even as we draw this discussion to a close, I maintain my perspective. While the grassroots courage you highlight is undoubtedly noble and historically vital, it is just insufficient on its own to manage the sheer complexities of the mid-2020s.
Insufficient how? Human courage is the only thing that has ever corrected systemic failure.
Because of the scale. The sheer scale of the physical AI infrastructure imperative, coupled with the profound daily threat of epistemic collapse, necessitates massive, coordinated public-private investments. We must embrace the active reimagining of our democratic architecture through algorithms. The friction in governance is simply too vast, and the geopolitical stakes regarding who controls this tech are too high to rely solely on decentralized, localized defiance. We have to use AI as a cognitive prosthetic to structurally upgrade our civic capacity and manage the intricate realities of a modern, vulnerable state.
And I must maintain that as long as this technology is governed by an elite class insulated by extreme wealth and driven by zero-sum calculations, systemic algorithmic solutions will remain fatally compromised. The federal push for deregulation and the overwillingness to override ethical boundaries for military supremacy, like we saw with Anthropic, prove that the machine is currently poised to simply learn and replicate our moral poverty. Therefore, the decentralized resilience, the empathy, and the extraordinary courage of ordinary people acting in their own communities remains the ultimate, indispensable defense for the survival of the democratic project.
Despite our vigorous disagreement on the solution, There is a profound point of convergence in our analysis today that we shouldn't overlook. Artificial intelligence is not a distant, alien force acting upon us from the outside. It is, fundamentally, a mirror.
Yes, it is a reflection.
Exactly. It reflects humanity's highest aspirations for knowledge, efficiency, and healing, right alongside our deepest, most destructive flaws and prejudices.
And that aligns perfectly with the closing sentiment of our source material. Human research is an ever-expanding pursuit. It's a continuous endeavor to decode our collective existence. There's much more to explore regarding how humanity's moral clarity, or the lack thereof, will ultimately guide the machine. The future depends not just on the computational power we achieve in server farms, but on the kind of people we choose to be in our daily lives.
We will leave those joining us to form their own conclusions regarding the future of democratic survival in the age of machines.
The future is here. AI Podcast at digitVIEW.
Don't blink. The evolution has only just begun.
This is digitVIEW.